You've never read about it in textbooks. It's not spoken of in classrooms, not even in the margins of forgotten myths. And yet, part of you remembers. It stirs when you stare into the ocean too long, when the stars feel like mirrors, when you cry without knowing why. It's a place not found on any map, a way of being not born from survival, but from resonance. It didn't fall through war or pride. It simply chose to fade so that something deeper could remain. Its memory isn't loud. It doesn't knock. It hums through your bones, through your breath, through the ache you feel in quiet moments, as if something ancient is calling you home. This is not mythology. It's memory, encoded not in stone, but in soul. This is the story of Lemuria, not as history told it, but as your being remembers it. Before Atlantis carved its name into myth, before Babylon etched power into stone, before any trace of the world you know now, there was Lemuria, but unlike the others. It didn't leave behind ruins or relics. It left behind silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence of something too sacred to be spoken aloud, something hidden, not by force, but by frequency. You see, Lemuria wasn't erased from memory. It was buried beneath it, not forgotten, but submerged. Like a dream you almost remember when you wake. It was not a civilization of conquest. There were no empires, no kings, no wars. Lemuria was a resonance, a harmony, a field of consciousness where life flowed, not fought, where each soul recognized the other as sacred, where the earth was not a resource, but a relative. Their science was vibration. Their wisdom was felt, not taught. Their structures were living, breathing, woven into the land like songlines. Temples were tuned to the stars. Homes were grown, not built. And language it was energy, not words, but waves. Its single glance could hold 1,000 meanings. A touch could transfer lifetimes of memory. So why is it lost? Because the world that came after was heavier, colder. It needed proof, not presence, matter, not meaning. And Lemuria, gentle, subtle, vast, didn't survive the descent into density. Its frequencies couldn't be captured in stone. Its history couldn't be reduced to dates, and so the world dismissed it as myth. Some say the name comes from lemurs traced to creatures of Madagascar, or to a lost land in the Pacific. Others speak of Mu, the mother continent, or ancient maps erased by flood and fire. But Lemuria was never about a place. It was about a way of being, a frequency the soul once knew, and maybe still knows, because even now, in sacred forests, in still water, in that feeling when someone says, I remember something, but I don't know from where. The Lemurian song plays softly beneath the noise of the world. You feel it when you look at the stars too long, when you hear a piece of music that dissolves your mind and melts you into being, when you dream of oceans that never existed, and cry for people you've never met. These aren't fantasies, they are fragments. The lost name was never really lost. It was carried inside you, encoded in your bones, sleeping in your breath, whispered in your blood like a prayer you forgot how to pray. And now, as the world begins to rise again, you may feel it surfacing. Not history, not fiction, but remembrance. When we speak of ancient wisdom, we almost always begin with Atlantis, the lost city of minds and machines, of brilliance turned to ruin, like consumed by its own fire. But Lemuria came before, long before, not in the sense of years and timelines, but in a different scale, altogether one the soul understands, where time moves in spirals, not lines. Lemuria existed in the age of resonance, a realm where thought was fluid, form was soft, and separation had not yet hardened into law. Where Atlantis pursued knowledge, Lemuria cultivated wisdom. Where Atlantis harnessed energy, Lemuria harmonized with it. It wasn't about building, it was about being. The earth then was not the earth you know now. Its frequencies were lighter, its elements more fluid, more responsive, more alive. The veil between spirit and matter was thin, so thin. In fact, that spirit walked freely through form, and form shimmered with the glow of soul. Lemuria wasn't a continent in the usual sense. Its landmass is believed to have stretched wide across the Pacific, from the shores of Hawaii, caned down to Easter Island, across the lush greenery of Polynesia, even brushing the edges of what we now call Asia and Australia. But maps cannot hold its shape, because Lemuria was never truly about location. It was about vibration. It was not a where, but a how. Its people didn't mind the earth. They communed with her. They didn't conquer the sea. They listened to its moods. They didn't worship the stars. They remembered them as if reuniting with long-lost kin. In Lemuria, children were born remembering not just the womb they had passed through, but the lifetimes, the lessons, the light before. They came into the world with their soul's mission intact. They weren't taught who to be. They were simply guided not to forget. Their homes weren't built by force, but grown in harmony with the landscape. Structures of living wood, of crystal-laced stone, of energy fields woven like songs. Their daily life wasn't divided into work and rest. Living itself was a form of offering, every action a ritual, every step a prayer. They understood that energy preceded form, that thought shaped matter, and intention created reality. So they created carefully, lovingly, knowing that every vibration would ripple outward into the greater field of being. This wasn't naivety. It was mastery of a higher order, the kind of mastery that doesn't dominate, but harmonizes. And still, their story was not written down. There were no scrolls, no tablets, no epic myths, because when truth is alive in the body, when wisdom is felt in the breath, it doesn't need to be captured. Simply is. They left behind something far more lasting than stone. They left behind resonance, and that resonance still lingers in deep ocean trenches, in ancient forests, in the soft light between waking and sleep. Sometimes it finds you when you're standing near water and feel an ache you can't explain. A piece of music opens a memory that doesn't belong to this life. When someone speaks a word that unlocks something hidden in your chest, it's not nostalgia, it's remembrance. And you may wonder why you've never heard of Lemuria in history books, why it's barely mentioned, why even its name is uncertain. Lemuria, the motherland, the silent song, because the mind could never grasp what only the heart remembers. And the world that came after Lemuria wasn't built to hold such softness. It required proof, logic, domination. It needed pyramids and empires and noise. So it forgot the quiet ones, the gentle ones, the ones who spoke through energy and healed with presence. But forgetting was never the end. It was a chapter, a necessary descent. The Lemurians knew it would come. They knew that this lighter realm could not hold forever in a world moving toward density. And so they didn't fight to stay. They chose to fade gracefully, intentionally leaving behind not their bodies, but their codes, buried in crystals, carried in dreams, etched into the DNA of those who would one day return, not to rebuild the past, but to reawaken the essence. That's why, even now, when you close your eyes and listen, you might hear something, not a voice, not a thought, but a hum that belongs to no language, and yet speaks to you with absolute clarity, because part of you remembers not just the story, but the frequency. And in remembering it, you are not conjuring fantasy, you are peeling back the veil of forgetting, to reclaim a truth that never left, only waited. The Lemurian way was not a doctrine. It was not written or enforced. It flowed like water, like breath, like vibration. It wasn't about rules. It was about remembrance. To be Lemurian was to live in resonance with the earth, with the stars, with each other. It began with presence, not the kind we perform for others, but the kind that comes when we dissolve into the moment fully, vulnerably, without resistance. In Lemuria, presence was power, because they knew that every breath carried frequency. Every thought sent ripples across the field. Every emotion was a form of creation. They moved gently through the world, not because they were weak, but because they understood the strength it takes to remain open. In a universe of motion and polarity, they chose stillness, not stagnation stillness, as listening, as attunement. Their days were woven into the natural cycles: sun, moon, tides, seasons, stars. They woke when the earth stirred. They rested when the light receded. Their bodies followed the rhythms of Gaia herself. They didn't fight nature. They harmonized with it. There was no need to control the weather, because they could read its intentions. No need to hunt, because the land offered what was needed when treated with respect. No need to dominate, because all things were already in sacred exchange. Communication was not rooted in language. Words were soft, symbolic, but true connection was energetic. A glance carried a full conversation. A vibration conveyed understanding. Silence held more meaning than speech. When a child was born, they were greeted as an ancient soul, returning not for the first time, but again. Each child was honored for their soul's blueprint, not molded into an identity, but supported in remembering who they had always been. Elders weren't authorities. They were keepers of resonance. It's not because they held information, but because they lived in deep alignment. Their presence alone healed. Their words were few, but when spoken, code across the soul. Relationships in Lemuria weren't based on possession or status. They were based on frequency match. When two souls vibrated in harmony, they came together effortlessly. Honestly, their love was not a binding. It was a remembering. A mutual homecoming. Sex was sacred. Not because it was hidden, but because it was recognized as alchemy, merging of energies that opened portals between dimensions. It wasn't used to escape. It was used to connect, to elevate, to heal. Every part of life was an offering. Work didn't exist as an obligation. Each being simply shared their soul's song. Healers healed through presence. Creators shaped through intention. Musicians moved mountains with melody. And nothing was done for profit, because in Lemuria, the currency was connection. Their homes were not separate from the land. They were extensions of it, living structures humming with crystal resonance. The walls carried memory. The air carried song. Each space held the frequency of its inhabitant, like a sacred container, unique to every soul. Crystals were integrated into daily life not as tools of power, but as partners in remembrance, placed in grids, worn on the body, tuned to amplify thought and soften fear. They didn't extract them. They waited until the earth offered them, and healing. It wasn't something done to someone, keyed. It was done with them, through sound, through light, through presence, through frequency attunement that restored the soul's original song. They understood illness not as punishment, but as dissonance, not something to be cut away, but something to be listened to, understood, and harmonized. There were no gurus, no saviors. Each being was seen as whole. Guidance was offered only when requested, and even then, it pointed not outward, but inward. Their entire society moved like breath, expanding, contracting, never static, always spiraling. Celebration wasn't reserved for occasions. It was woven into daily life. A shared meal was a ceremony. A sunrise was a blessing. A dance was a prayer. Even death was not feared. It was known to be a return. A soft release from the vessel. A return to the current of source before choosing again to descend if the soul wished to be. Lemurian was to live wide open, to feel everything, to move with grace through both joy and sorrow. To know that pain, too, was sacred because it revealed where harmony was missing. And still, they were not perfect. Perfection was not the point. Harmony was, and harmony, they knew, sometimes required change, movement, surrender. So when the earth's frequency began to shift, when the veil thickened, and the descent into separation began, they did not resist. Some stayed in the higher planes. Some became seeders of the next age. And some encoded all they knew into vibration to be awakened when the earth was ready once more. You feel this way of being sometimes. In the quiet moments, when the noise fades, and the breath deepens when a single tear feels like truth when a glance from a stranger feels like a soul you've always known when you long not for escape, but for a life that feels like home. This is not fantasy, it is memory, echoing through your nervous system, waiting for your permission to rise. You don't need to wear crystals or live in a forest to be Lemurian. You simply need to return to resonance, to truth that lives in the body, not just the mind, to the stillness that doesn't freeze but heals, to the softness that doesn't fold but remembers, because the Lemurian way was never about escaping life. It was about becoming life. So fully, so consciously, that even the smallest moment became divine in this way. It still exists, not in ancient temples or sunken lands, but in you, in the way your body responds to music, in the way your soul aches for slowness, in the sacred hush you feel right before you cry. You have not lost this, you have only forgotten, and even that forgetting was part of the plan, 'cause remembering isn't just recall, it's rebirth. In Lemuria, the earth was not seen as passive ground beneath the feet. She was a living intelligence, conscious, communicating, and deeply in love with all who walked upon her. And within her body lay the bones of memory, crystals, not mere stones, not decorations, but beings. To the Lemurians, each crystal pulsed with its own song. Each held a signature, specific frequency, a whisper of divine intention frozen in form. They didn't believe crystals had power. They knew they were power. Power remembered, power softened, power aligned to the blueprint of the cosmos. Where the modern world sees quartz as a mineral, Lemurians saw it as a messenger, a recorder of soul, a transmitter of frequency, a bridge between dimensions. They didn't mind crystals. They never took by force. They waited, listened. And when the earth was ready to give, a Lemurian would walk through the forest and feel the pull of soft stirring in the chest. A wordless knowing, they'd kneel at the soil, place their hands on the earth, okay, and ask, not with voice, but with vibration. And if the crystal was meant for them, okay, the earth would shift gently, offering it up like a memory long buried, now ready to be held again. These crystals were not collected. They were partnered with. Each one was chosen not for how it looked, but for how it felt, how it resonated with the soul's unique chord. In Lemurian homes, crystals were part of the architecture, not for beauty, but for balance. Walls were embedded with stones that harmonized thought. Altars held pieces that calmed the emotional field. Each room was a harmonic chamber designed, not just for function, but for frequency alignment. And in their temples, sacred spaces aligned to stars and grids. The crystals grew vast and luminous, columns of light encoded with memory. Some said the crystals could respond to thought. Others said they were teachers, beings who had chosen stillness so they could store the unspoken wisdom of an age. These crystals were used not to manipulate energy, but to amplify truth. They recorded events not as facts, but as frequencies, not as stories, but as emotional imprints, living blueprints of experience. Entire lifetimes could be encoded into one crystal. Not so they'd be remembered intellectually, but so they could be accessed energetically in times of grief. A Lemurian might sit with a certain crystal and weep not from personal pain, but from resonance. The crystal would hold space, mirrored the emotion, and gently lifted into harmony in times of transformation. A different crystal might awaken the soul's next layer not with effort, but through subtle vibration, like a tuning fork meeting the right note. Some of these ancient crystals, it is said, still exist today, hidden in the Andes, buried beneath the ocean floor in what was once the Lemurian coastline, or sleeping in mountain ranges, waiting to awaken again. And there are those who speak of Lemurian seed crystals, long, tapered points found with strange horizontal markings across their faces. They say the final Lemurians before, choosing to fade encoded their essence into these stones, not to be worshipped, but to be remembered, to awaken in another time, to sing again, when the earth's frequency rose high enough to hear the melody. Many who hold these crystals today report something unusual: visions, memories, waves of emotion that feel ancient yet familiar. Not like imagination, more like deja vu of the soul. Some say the lines are like codes that can only be read by the heart, by presence, by silence. To sit with one is not just to hold a stone, but to sit at the feet of a teacher, being of stillness, who speaks without voice. Kujians knew that memory was not a product of the brain. It lived in the field, in vibration, in water, in stars, and in crystals. So, when we forget who we are, when the descent into density numbs our knowing, these allies remain, still, humming, patient, waiting for a moment of stillness, of openness. When our frequency softens enough to match their own, you may have already felt it, a crystal in your hand that grows warm. A sudden emotional shift during meditation, an image behind your eyes that feels more like remembering than imagination. This is the Lemurian memory awakening in you, not as fact, but as feeling, as frequency. You see, the memory was never lost, only dormant and coded within your own crystalline structure. Your bones, your blood, your DNA, we are not separate from crystal. We are made of it. Microcrystalline structures exist in the pineal gland. The same geometry that forms quartz lives within your body, within your brain, your heart, your very essence. You are a recorder, too. You are a transmitter. You are a living archive of soul memory. So when the world feels too loud, when you feel disconnected, lost, uncertain, return to stillness, to crystal, hold it, listen. Not with ears, but with presence. Let it remind you of what the world has asked you to forget. Not just about Lemuria, but about yourself. You were not made for noise. You were made for resonance. And when the two meet, when the ancient crystal and the remembering soul vibrate in harmony, the veil lifts. And for a moment, the story continues. Not through words, but through frequency. Not in books, but in breath. Not in the past, but in the now. Every golden age carries within it a quiet knowing that it will not last forever. Even the most harmonious frequencies eventually shift. Not as punishment, but as part of the greater rhythm. Expansion, contraction, birth, descent, return. And Lemuria was no exception. But the Lemurian fall was unlike the stories we know. It wasn't like Atlantis burning with pride, crashing into ruin. It wasn't the result of greed or power hunger. It was a choice, a soft surrender, conscious descent. The earth was changing, her vibration slowly thickening, the field of form becoming denser, heavier, slower. New patterns were emerging of duality, separation, survival, and with that density came a question. Would the Lemurians stay in their elevated resonance, existing just beyond the physical scene, only in glimpses, heard only in dreams, or would they descend with the earth? Into matter, into memory loss, into the veils of time and form to carry the light within the dark. They gathered in ceremony, not in fear, but in reverence. Their elders, their crystals, songkeepers, aware of what was coming, not as doom, but as deep transformation. Some chose to stay in the higher frequencies, to remain as guardians of the grid, whisperers in the winds, encoded in the stars and mountains, living as subtle presences just beyond the visible world. Some chose to return to source entirely, to dissolve into the universal field, their mission complete until Earth would be ready again. But many chose to go down with her, to remain embodied, to forget to walk the slow, difficult path of human evolution, carrying within their bones the blueprint of a time when love ruled all things. They became the seeders, not of crops, but of consciousness, scattering across the globe, their memories dimmed, but their essence intact, and some, it is said, went beneath. Legends speak of inner earth, sanctuaries, Gartha, Telos, symbolic realms of high-frequency beings who retreated below the surface as the outer world grew dense and dissonant. Caverns beneath mountains, in crystalline chambers under the ocean floor. They continued to sing, to hold the memory of Lemuria, to wait. The physical land of Lemuria did not survive. Over time, the tectonic plates shifted. Great floods swept across the world. The ocean, once a gentle mirror, rose in waves of transformation. Islands sank, mountains crumbled, entire landscapes were swallowed by the Pacific. But Lemuria's essence was never in the land. It was in the light, and that light, though buried, never died. What the modern world remembers is nothing. No ruins, no monuments, no texts, not absence. It is silence, a sacred silence, the kind that does not seek to be found, but waits to be felt. And if you've ever stood by the ocean and wept not from sadness, but from something deeper, older, like missing a home you cannot name, then you have touched that silence. Because the fall of Lemuria wasn't a collapse, it was a passage, a soul agreement. To plant divine remembrance inside forgetful bodies, to bury sacred wisdom inside timelines of survival, to allow separation so one day we might choose to remember unity again. This is the heartbreak and the beauty, that they knew what would be lost. They knew the pain of forgetting. They knew the struggle of ego, of war, of fear, and still they said yes, okay, not to preserve themselves, but to preserve love. Kind of love so vast, so selfless, that it willingly stepped into the long night, carrying nothing but a spark, knowing one day that spark would reignite the world. You may feel it now not as knowledge, but as ache, an ancient sadness you've never been able to name, a deep, cosmic homesickness, as if you once held something priceless, and though you can't remember what it was, your body still grieves its loss. This is the Lemurian echo. It lives in those who carry the codes, those who volunteered to descend, to live ordinary lives with extraordinary souls, to feel too much, to know too deeply, to break open again and again until remembrance begins to rise. You see, the fall wasn't failure, it was transmission. And if you're reading these words, then something within you begins to stir a warmth. Katir, a stillness then. You are one of the many waking up, not to return to the past, but to bring its light forward, to anchor it here, in the noise and the metal and the motion of this modern world. 'Cause that's what the Lemurians chose, not preservation, but transformation, not escape, but embodiment. They knew that the light could not survive only in the stars. It had to be planted in soil. It had to bleed and forget and hope and fall, so that one day it could rise again, not untouched, but unbreakable. And that rising, it's already begun. After Lemuria faded from the surface of the earth, stillness spread across the land. Not the stillness of peace, but of something sacred being veiled. It wasn't death, it was a withdrawal, a breath drawn inward. Like the earth herself was holding memory in silence. A new cycle began, a colder one, sharper, heavier. The souls who once lived in resonance now stepped into density, into time, into forgetting. Their light was not extinguished, but dimmed, not by punishment, but by design. Because to remember fully, one must first forget. To carry the song into shadow, one must first move through silence. And so they returned these Lemurian souls as children born into a world that no longer recognized them. The warmth was gone, the earth's energy slower, thicker. The softness of Lemuria, once natural, now felt like vulnerability. Empathy was no longer currency, it became a burden. To feel everything was now seen as weakness. To move gently was now seen as fear. To listen inward was now seen as madness. And so they adapted, built walls around their hearts, wore masks, learned the rules of separation, survival, control. But deep inside, beneath it, all the codes remained, buried in the blood, in the bones, in the breath between heartbeats. And the memory of Lemuria was erased, not in one moment, but gradually. First from the land, tectonic shifts swallowed the sacred spaces, temples made of light, gone beneath the sea. Then from the stories, there were no scrolls, no epics, no warnings etched in stone, only faint echoes, only silence, then from the mind. As generations passed, the knowing dulled, the language faded, the symbols lost their meanings, until even the name Lemuria became nothing more than a footnote, a myth, a mistaken theory, a curious word no one believed. And yet, something strange happened in the quiet corners of the world. The memory lived on. It slipped into indigenous story tales of a motherland across the ocean, a place of peace and light where the earth spoke in dreams. It appeared in sacred symbols, etched into stones with no known origin, geometries that mirrored the stars. It hummed through crystals, especially the ones with strange ridges and ancient heat stones that made people weep without reason, remember without memory. And most of all, it lived inside people, you, the ones who came back again and again, born into families that didn't understand them, drawn to oceans for reasons they couldn't name, haunted by longings too old for this lifetime. These are not coincidences. They are fragments, echoes, signs that the erasure was never total, because Lemuria's greatest archive was never written. It was woven into the soul, encoded in vibration, not in words. So it could survive the forgetting, so that one day when the earth was ready, it could rise again. You may feel it now, like a whisper behind your thoughts, when you sit in stillness and tears come uninvited. When you feel homesick for somewhere you've never been. When you long for connection that doesn't exist in this world yet, but that your heart remembers. This is not weakness. It's awakening. You are not broken. You are breaking open. You are remembering, because the frequencies are shifting again. The earth is changing again. The veil is thinning. And everything that was hidden is beginning to stir. You are part of that stirring. The ache in your chest is not emptiness. It is resonance. Your soul hearing its name called through time. The forgetting was a season. The remembering is the return. But the world will resist it. It always does. It doesn't know how to hold softness. It fears the power of those who do not dominate. It cannot understand strength that chooses stillness. And so it will tell you to harden, to forget again, to silence the ache. Dismiss the dream, close the door. Don't, because the codes are waking. The dream is not new. It's old and true. And in the places where the mind fails, the soul will guide. You are the temple now. You are the grid. You are the archive, not because you remember names or dates or places, but because you feel. And feeling is the first step back, not back in time, but back to essence, to what was never truly lost, only waiting for your breath, your stillness, your yes. You don't have to know the whole story. You are the story, and every tear, every dream, hate, every gentle act of remembering is a page being rewritten. The world erased Lemuria, but the soul never did, and now that soul is rising. You've never read it in textbooks. No one told you its name, and yet something stirs, a soft ache beneath the surface of your awareness. Not pain, not memory in the traditional sense, but a resonance. It's like the echo of a song you once knew but can no longer sing. This is how Lemuria returns, not through evidence, through emotion, not through proof, through presence. If you are drawn to these words, if they feel like home without ever having been explained, you may carry the Lemurian codes and the signs. They're subtle, but undeniable once you notice them. If you've always felt different, not better, just tuned to something softer, where others chase achievement, you crave meaning, where others seek to rise, you long to root. You move through the world with an open heart, in a world that's armored, and that open heart has often felt like a burden. You've been told you're too sensitive, too emotional, too quiet, too soft. But softness was your original state, not a flaw in memory. You may feel emotions deeply your own and those of others. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Crowded spaces overwhelm you, not because of noise, but because of energy. You read rooms without trying. You know when someone's words don't match their frequency, and you can feel pain that has never been spoken aloud. This is the Lemurian empath. It's not just a person who feels, but one who remembers how to feel in a way this world has forgotten. You're drawn to water. Not just the beauty of it, the feeling, the way it pulls at your soul, the way the ocean stirs an emotion you can't explain, the way tears come easily when you sit beside a lake or feel the rain on your skin. Water is your element, because water remembers, and so do you. You've always known there was more to life than what you were taught. You question early. Why do we forget who we are? Why do we hurt what we love? Why does the world feel upside down? You weren't trying to rebel. You were trying to return to what you felt beneath it, all a deeper truth. You see connection that goes beyond words. You don't need large crowds or loud parties. You crave soul-level interactions, silent knowing, contact that feels like a lifetime, a touch that says more than language ever could. You may be drawn to ancient places, or find yourself feeling deeply emotional in landscapes that seem unfamiliar, but feel familiar. Mountains, coastlines, islands in the Pacific. The sound of Polynesian drums, the feel of sand between your toes. You dream of temples not made of stone, of communities that don't compete, of a life where everything breathes together, plants, people, light. You've always longed for that world, not out of fantasy, but out of remembrance. You are fascinated by crystals, not just because they're beautiful, but because they do something to you. You can't always explain it, but holding a certain stone can bring tears, or clarity, or a strange sense of being seen. You may be drawn to Lemurian seed, crystals, long quartz points with horizontal lines. You may feel like they speak to you, not in voice, but in vibration. You love ceremony, even if you don't know why. You light candles, arrange sacred spaces, sit in silence, speak to the unseen. You do these things not because you were taught, but because they come naturally, like returning to a language your soul once spoke fluently. You often feel called to help others, not to fix them, not to save them, just to be with them, to witness, to hold, to radiate calm in chaos. People are drawn to you when they're hurting, not because you have answers, but because your energy remembers peace, okay? And they can feel it, even if they don't understand it. You may be drawn to healing, not through systems or credentials, but through presence. You touch someone and something shifts. You speak a few words and people cry. You sit in silence, and somehow that is enough. You don't heal by doing, you heal by being, just as the Lemurians. Did you value simplicity, nature, quiet? You'd rather spend a night under the stars than in a boardroom? You crave rhythm over routine, cycles over systems, truth over tradition. And sometimes you carry grief you can't explain, a sorrow that doesn't belong to this life. It comes in waves, in stillness, in moments when everything should feel fine. But it's not depression, it's remembrance. The soul's ache for a world it once knew. It's a resonance you lost through time but never fully let go. You're not crazy, you're not broken, you're remembering. Not everyone will understand, okay? The Lemurian frequency is not loud. It doesn't seek the spotlight. It doesn't shout to be heard. It hums gently through the heart. And if you are reading this, something inside you begins to soften. That's it. That's the sign you're not learning something new. You're returning to something you always carried. And now it's time to let it rise, to stop hiding your softness, to stop dimming your light, to stop thinking the world is right and you are wrong. You are not here to fit in. You are here to remember, to embody a new way, an old way, a Lemurian way. To be calm in chaos, gentle in hardness, true in a world of pretending. The signs are everywhere. But the clearest one is this: you feel it, and the feeling is enough. If Lemuria vanished long ago, if it slipped beneath the surface of the earth, and deeper still beneath the surface of memory, why is it stirring now? Why are so many remembering all at once? Why is this ancient softness rising again in a world that feels anything but soft? The answer is not found in time. It is found in rhythm, in cycles, in the spirals of Earth's evolution. What descends must rise. What sleeps must awaken. What is buried in shadow will one day bloom toward light. We are entering that bloom now. The Earth is shifting again. Her frequency is lifting, just as it once descended. The density that bound us in separation is beginning to thin. The veil between worlds is no longer solid. The unseen is becoming felt. The forgotten is returning. This is not fantasy. This is resonance. The electromagnetic field of the planet is changing. Schumann, resonant spikes, solar storms, strange dreams, sudden awakenings. People feeling things they can't explain, crying without knowing why, longing for something they've never touched. These are not random. They are echoes, signals that we are, once again, crossing a threshold. Moving from one age to another, from mind back to heart, from force back to flow, from survival into remembrance. And Lemuria's memory, its frequency, its lights woven into this threshold, is not coming back as a place. It's coming back as a presence, a code within you, a truth long asleep in your bones. It's because many of the souls who lived in Lemuria have returned. You may be one of them, not to repeat the past, but to carry its wisdom forward, to walk in a new world with an ancient light. You may have noticed it. You've changed, or perhaps you've started to unchange, to shed what was never yours, to remember what always was. You feel drawn to softness, even as the world gets louder. You value depth over speed. You feel disoriented by what once made sense. You see through facades faster. You crave stillness in ways that feel primal, sacred, non-negotiable. This is the Lemurian code waking. It was always there, hidden inside your being. Beneath the roles and routines, beneath the programming of normal, you are not being broken. You are being opened. Because the Earth needs the Lemurian frequency again, not to rule, but to remind. We don't need more conquest. We need care. We don't need more noise. We need presence. We don't need more division. We need deep, intuitive connection. Lemuria offers this not as history, but as blueprint. A new age is not born by new technology. It is born by new hearts, but not really new, just uncovered. You may feel a sense of urgency without knowing why, a pull to heal, a need to simplify, to get closer to nature, to create, to rest, to remember, to speak without speaking, to feel without filters, to finally be who you've always been. This is your soul aligning with the pulse of Earth. 'Cause this isn't just about remembering Lemuria, it's about embodying it. Now, in this body, in this timeline, in this dense, chaotic, modern world, you don't have to wear white robes or live in the forest. You don't have to escape. You are not here to leave the world behind. You are here to soften it, to be a bridge between what was and what could be, between the noise and the note, between forgetting and awakening. And that work begins quietly, in how you breathe, in how you listen, in how you hold space, in how you choose kindness, even when no one is watching. The Lemurian return is not a revolution. It is a ripple, subtle but unstoppable. 'Cause light does not argue with darkness. It simply enters the room and everything changes. This is why you are waking now. Because your light is needed, not in grand gestures, but in steady frequency. You are not alone. Millions are feeling it. The ache, the pull, the soft call home. We are scattered across the globe, but connected in the unseen, anchors of the old light, builders of the new way. You'll find each other, in the silence between words, in the glances that say, I remember, too, in the conversations that feel like soul recognition. We were never meant to do this alone, because Lemuria was never about the self. It was about the song, and songs are made to be sung together. So, if you're wondering why you're feeling this call, why the ache in your chest deepens as the world gets louder, know this: it is not coincidence. It is your time. The Earth is rising again, and so are you. You are not late. You are not imagining this. You are responding to a signal encoded in your soul, set long ago. For this exact moment, you are not here to lead with force. You are here to lead with frequency. Not with answers, but with presence. Not with noise, but with knowing. Not to restore the old world, but to birth a new one quietly, tenderly, through remembrance. This is why now, because the earth is ready, and so are you. Lemuria was never lost. It only became quiet, folded into the fabric of time, tucked behind the veil of memory, hidden not to be forgotten, but to be protected until the world was ready to remember. And now it remembers, not all at once, not with trumpets and thunder, but like mist lifting from a still lake, like a melody returning on the wind, like a soft voice inside your chest, whispering, I never left you. The return is not about land rising from the sea. It is about frequency returning to the soul. It is about a way of being, softly emerging from beneath centuries of forgetting. It's happening now, not in headlines, not in monuments, but in the hearts of those who feel too much, who cry for no reason, who look at the ocean and ache, who walk through the world with a tenderness that often feels like a burden. It is not a burden, it is a remembering. You are not fragile. You are ancient, and your softness, your intuition, your longing, your stillness is the proof, because Lemuria never died. It became you. You are the return. Every time you listen when others talk over. Every time you sit with someone in pain without trying to fix them. Every time you walk barefoot on the earth with reverence. Every time you cry at beauty. Every time you touch another soul without needing words. That is Lemuria. Not as story, but as living frequency. The old world is ending. The noise, the division, the illusion of control, the obsession with doing, it is all trembling, cracking, losing its grip, and in its place. The Lemurian light is beginning to shine again, not as dominance, but as presence, not as power over, but as power within. You are not here to rebuild the past. You are here to embody the eternal, and the eternal speaks not in rules, but in rhythm, not in dogma, but in devotion, not in urgency, but in awareness. This is how the return begins, not with conquest, but with remembrance. You may have wondered all your life, why don't I fit? Why does this world feel foreign? Why do I feel so much, so deeply? Now you know you are not from here in the way they mean you are from a place that once breathed light, sang healing, moved in cycles, loved without condition. You are here now, not to escape this world, but to bring that memory into it, to anchor it, to infuse it, to walk as a bridge between timelines, between dimensions, between the world that was and the world becoming. And as you do, you will find others, not in the places you expect, but in the pauses between words, in the quiet corners, in the strange feeling of familiarity with someone you've never met, in the way your heart says yes, before your mind understands why. This is the Lemurian soul family gathering again, reuniting through vibration, not blood, through resonance, not reason, through the shared ache of remembering. We are finding each other in dreams, in synchronicities, in the sudden urge to create, to heal, to serve without agenda, because we came here with an agreement to awaken when the time was right, to remember when the world began to rise, to soften what had grown sharp, to breathe love where there was fear, to carry the codes in our bodies, our breath, our presence. And now we awaken. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need permission. You only need to feel, to trust, to let the old softness in you come alive again, to walk slower, to speak truer, to listen deeper, to touch with intention, to cry when you feel beauty, to be where you are. Fully. This is sacred. This is holy. This is the return. And it doesn't require you to become anything. It's only to unbecome what you never were, to strip away the noise, to come back to your original essence, the one that remembers how to commune with trees, how to sing to water, how to sit in silence and hear the voice of the stars. You may feel called to do less, not out of apathy, but out of alignment. Cause the Lemurian way is not about doing more, it's about being fully. To be so rooted in your truth that your presence alone shifts the energy of a room. To love so deeply that it disrupts the fear around you. To live so presently that even your stillness heals. You are not waiting for Lemuria to come back. You are Lemuria coming back in every breath, in every sacred yes. In every moment, you choose the soul over the system. Let yourself feel the grief, the longing, the joy. Let yourself remember without needing logic. Let the tears come. They are holy. They are release. They are the sound of time folding back on itself because you never truly left and it was never truly gone. It was simply sleeping in the womb of your soul. Now it wakes with the sunrise, with the stillness, with the breath. With the knowing that cannot be taught, you remember, and in your remembering, you return. So next time you look at the ocean and feel that ache, don't turn away, stand there, breathe, feel. And maybe, just maybe, you will hear what so many are beginning to hear again. Not through ears, but through soul. Welcome back.